Picture this. It's 1931. A French explorer is sitting under the stars in West Africa, listening to an elder from the Dogon tribe draw symbols in the sand. The elder points to the brightest star in the night sky and says something that makes the explorer's jaw drop. That star? It has an invisible companion. It circles around it every 50 years. It's made of the heaviest matter in the universe. Here's the thing that'll blow your mind. Scientists wouldn't discover this invisible star with telescopes for another 40 years. So how did a tribe in Mali, with no telescopes, no computers, no modern technology, know about a star that's completely invisible to the naked eye? And that's just the beginning. What the Dogon knew about our universe is about to make you question everything you thought you knew about ancient knowledge. Let's start with the star that started it all. Sirius. You've probably seen it. It's that super bright star that looks like someone stuck a diamond in the sky. The Dogon call it Sigwe Tolo. But here's where things get weird. The Dogon didn't just know about Sirius. They knew it had a buddy, a companion star they called Patolo. They said Patolo was tiny but incredibly heavy. Like, imagine taking the entire Earth and squishing it down to the size of a peanut. That kind of heavy. They said it was white, it rotated on its axis, and it took exactly 50 years to orbit around Sirius. Now you're probably thinking, okay, maybe they just made a lucky guess? But wait. In 1862, an American astronomer named Alvin Clark discovered that Sirius actually does have a companion star, Sirius B. And get this, it's a white dwarf star. That means it's exactly what the Dogon described. Tiny, white, and unbelievably dense. We're talking about matter so compressed that a teaspoon of it would weigh as much as a car. But here's the kicker. You literally cannot see Sirius B without a powerful telescope. It's 40,000 times dimmer than Sirius A. That's like trying to spot a firefly next to a lighthouse. Even with our best telescopes in the 1920s, astronomers could barely make it out. So how did the Dogon know? The accuracy is what really gets scientists scratching their heads. The Dogon said Patolo takes 50 years to orbit Sirius. Modern astronomy says it's 50.04 years. They said it rotates on its axis. White dwarf stars do rotate. They said it was the smallest and heaviest type of star. White dwarfs are literally the densest objects in the universe after black holes and neutron stars. But wait, there's more. The Dogon also talked about a third star in the Sirius system, which they called Emiya. They said this one had planets orbiting around it. Now, astronomers have been debating for years whether there might actually be a Sirius C. Some observations suggest there could be a third star, but we still haven't confirmed it. Imagine if the Dogon turn out to be right about this too. The Dogon's knowledge wasn't just about naming stars either. They understood that stars and planets were different things. They knew that planets orbited around stars. They even knew that the Earth rotates on its axis, which gives us day and night. Remember, this is knowledge that took humanity thousands of years to figure out. Galileo got in massive trouble with the church for suggesting the Earth moved around the sun. But the Dogon? They'd apparently known this stuff for centuries. Their astronomical knowledge extended way beyond Sirius too. They knew about the rings of Saturn. They knew that Jupiter had 4 major moons. They knew that the moon was dry and dead. They even had theories about how the universe began that sound surprisingly similar to what we now call the Big Bang. The Dogon tracked the movements of Venus and created a calendar based on the positions of the stars. They identified different constellations and used them for navigation and agriculture. They understood that the Milky Way was a massive collection of stars, describing it as a spiral of stars that contain the Earth. What makes this even more mind-blowing is that the Dogon didn't write this knowledge down in books. They passed it down through generations using oral traditions, sacred ceremonies, and intricate symbols. Every 60 years, they hold a ceremony called the Sigwe ceremony, which corresponds to the orbit of Sirius B, except they've been doing this for at least 1,000 years, way before any telescope could have shown them this star existed. Their priests, called the Dogon, were the keepers of this knowledge. They would spend years learning the sacred astronomy, memorizing complex diagrams and symbols that represented the movements of celestial bodies. These weren't just random patterns. They were sophisticated astronomical charts that accurately depicted orbital mechanics. Think about what this means. While Europeans were still arguing about whether the Earth was flat, the Dogon had already mapped out star systems that we wouldn't discover until the space age. They understood concepts like orbital periods, stellar density, and planetary system centuries before we had the technology to observe them. So the big question remains. How did they know? How did a tribe living in mud brick houses in West Africa figure out astronomical facts that required advanced mathematics and powerful telescopes for us to discover? Some say they must have had contact with an advanced civilization. Others think they had a type of knowledge we've lost. But the Dogon themselves? They have a completely different explanation, and it's stranger than anything you could imagine. What do you think? How could an ancient tribe know about an invisible star? Drop your theories in the comments. I want to hear what you think is going on here. Okay, so you want to know how the Dogon say they got this knowledge? Buckle up, because this is where things go from weird to absolutely mind-bending. According to the Dogon, they didn't figure this stuff out on their own. They were taught by visitors from Sirius. The Dogon call them the Nommo. And before you roll your eyes and click away, hear me out, because the details of this story are what make it so fascinating. The Nommo weren't described as little green men or flying saucers. The Dogon say they were amphibious beings, kind of like mermaids or mermen, but from space. They needed water to survive and could live both in water and on land. According to Dogon mythology, the Nommo arrived in an ark that descended from the sky in a whirlwind of dust and loud noise. The way they describe it sounds eerily similar to how we describe a spacecraft landing, complete with the dust clouds, the thunderous sound, and the burning flames. They say the ark landed on 3 legs, leaving marks on the ground. After it landed, water poured out, creating a lake for the Nommo to live in. Now here's what's interesting. The Dogon don't treat this as some vague myth. They get specific. Really specific. They say the Nommo came from a planet that orbits around Emiya, that third star in the Sirius system we talked about. They describe this planet as having more water than Earth, which is why the beings evolved to be amphibious. The Nommo supposedly taught the Dogon everything: agriculture, weaving, astronomy, and the arts. But most importantly, they shared knowledge about the cosmos. They explained how Ptolo worked, how the solar system was organized, and how the universe itself came to be. The Dogon say the Nommo drew diagrams in the sand, teaching them about orbital mechanics and stellar evolution. But here's the thing that makes researchers take this seriously. The Dogon aren't the only ones with this story. All across Africa, there are tribes with similar legends about fish-like beings who came from the sky and shared knowledge. The Babylonians had Oans, a fish god who emerged from the sea and taught humanity civilization. The Sumerians talked about the Apkallu, 7 sage beings who were half fish and taught mankind wisdom. Even in Greek mythology, we have stories of Triton and other sea beings who possessed advanced knowledge. In Sanskrit texts from India, there are references to beings called the Nagas, serpent or fish-like entities who lived in water and possessed advanced technology. Chinese mythology has dragon kings who lived in underwater palaces and controlled technology that seemed like magic. What's crazy is that all these cultures, separated by thousands of miles and years, describe these beings in remarkably similar ways. They're always associated with water. They always bring knowledge. They always come from the stars or the sky. And they always teach humanity about astronomy, agriculture, and civilization. The Dogon's version is just way more detailed. They don't just say, beings from the sky taught us stuff. They give you coordinates. They provide orbital periods. They describe the physical properties of stars. It's like the difference between saying, I met someone from Europe, and saying, I met someone from 42 Rue de la Paix in Paris, France, who took the 3:42 p.m. train from Gare du Nord. The Nommo weren't described as gods either. The Dogon are very clear about this. They were physical beings who needed water to survive. They were teachers and guides, but they were mortal. They could die. In fact, according to Dogon tradition, one of the Nommo was sacrificed and dismembered to purify the earth and make it habitable for humans. This sacrifice is commemorated in their ceremonies. The Dogon also say the Nommo will return. They believe that when Ptolo completes a certain number of orbits, the Nommo will come back to Earth. Some Dogon priests claim we're actually approaching this time now, which is, well, make of that what you will. Now, skeptics have explanations for all this. They say the Dogon probably got their knowledge from European visitors in the early 1900s. Maybe missionaries or explorers shared astronomical knowledge that got incorporated into their mythology. But there are problems with this theory. First, the Dogon's astronomical knowledge was already part of their oldest traditions when the French arrived. The Sigouet ceremony, which is based on the orbit of Sirius B, has been happening for centuries. We can trace it back through their oral history at least 700 years. That's way before any European knew about Sirius B. Second, the level of detail is wrong for contamination. If a missionary in 1920 told the Dogon about Sirius B, why would they know its exact orbital period? Why would they know about its density? Most people in 1920 didn't know these things. Even astronomers were still figuring it out. Third, the Dogon's knowledge includes things we didn't know in the 1920s or 1930s. They described the spiral structure of the Milky Way. They talked about millions of stars in space. They understood that planets orbit around stars. This wasn't common knowledge back then. The French anthropologists who first studied the Dogon, Marcel Griaule and Germain Dieterlen, spent decades with the tribe. They learned the language, participated in ceremonies, and gained the trust of the priests. They were convinced that this knowledge was ancient, not recent. Griaule wrote that the Dogon's astronomical knowledge was unbelievable and couldn't be explained by cultural contamination. Even Carl Sagan, the famous astronomer and skeptic, admitted that the Dogon mystery was puzzling. He suggested cultural contamination as the most likely explanation, but acknowledged that there were aspects of the story that didn't quite fit. So we're left with a mystery. Did amphibious beings really visit Earth thousands of years ago and share advanced knowledge? Or is there some other explanation we haven't thought of? The Dogon themselves have no doubt. To them, the Nommo are as real as the stars in the sky. Are we really alone in the universe? Or did we have teachers from the stars who've been trying to tell us something all along? Let me know what you think. Is this evidence of ancient contact, or is there another explanation? Now let's talk about something that makes this whole thing even stranger: the way the Dogon encoded this knowledge. They didn't just tell stories. They created an entire system of sacred symbols and mathematical concepts that would make your high school geometry teacher's head spin. The Dogon used something called cosmic diagrams. These aren't just pretty pictures. They're complex mathematical representations of astronomical phenomena. One of their most important symbols is called the kanaga. It looks kind of like a stick figure with its arms and legs spread out, but it actually represents the rotation of the Earth and the movement of the universe. Here's where it gets wild. The Dogon have a symbol for Ptolo, Sirius B. It's an ellipse with a dot in the center. Now you might think, so what? It's just an oval. But this symbol accurately represents the elliptical orbit of Sirius B around Sirius A. The dot represents Sirius A at one of the focal points of the ellipse. That's literally how planetary orbits work according to Kepler's laws of planetary motion, which weren't figured out by European astronomers until the 1600s. But the Dogon didn't stop there. They have different symbols for different types of celestial objects. Stars get one symbol. Planets get another. They even have a specific symbol for things that orbit around other things. It's like they created their own astronomical notation system centuries before we did. The numbers in Dogon cosmology are absolutely fascinating. Everything is based on specific numerical patterns. The number 60 is super important to them. Remember the Sigüe ceremony that happens every 60 years? But it's not random. They chose 60 because it's divisible by so many numbers. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 10, 12, 15, 20, 30, and 60. This makes it perfect for astronomical calculations. They also use the number 266 a lot. Why 266? It turns out that 266 days is exactly how long a human pregnancy lasts from conception. But it's also connected to their astronomical observations. They noticed patterns in star movements that repeat every 266 days. They literally connected human biology to cosmic cycles. The Dogon have this concept called the egg of the world. They draw it as an oval with 7 segments inside, each representing a different stage of creation. But here's the thing. When modern physicists look at this diagram, they see something familiar. It looks remarkably similar to how we diagram the expansion of the universe after the Big Bang. 7 stages of cosmic evolution, expanding from a single point. They also understood something called spiral dynamics. They knew that many things in nature move in spirals, from water going down a drain to the shape of galaxies. They incorporated this into their symbols, showing the Milky Way as a massive spiral of stars. Remember, nobody could see the spiral structure of our galaxy until we had radio telescopes in the 1950s. The Dogon priests used something called sand diagrams to teach this knowledge. They draw incredibly complex patterns in the sand, showing the movements of celestial bodies over time. These aren't just artistic. They're functional. You can actually use them to predict where stars will be at different times of the year. One diagram shows the orbit of Earth around the Sun, complete with the tilt of Earth's axis that gives us seasons. Another shows the phases of the Moon and how they relate to its orbit around Earth. They even have diagrams showing the retrograde motion of planets, that weird backward movement planets seem to make when Earth overtakes them in orbit. The mathematical precision is what really amazes researchers. The Dogon use geometric progressions, fractals, and complex ratios in their designs. They understand concepts like the golden ratio, that special number that appears everywhere in nature. They use it in their architecture, their art, and their astronomical calculations. Their counting system is also unique. While we use base 10, probably because we have 10 fingers, the Dogon use multiple number bases depending on what they're counting. For astronomical calculations, they often use base 60, just like the ancient Babylonians did. This is actually better for astronomy because 60 can be divided evenly in so many ways. The Dogon also have this concept of twinness or duality that runs through everything. Every important concept has a twin or opposite. Light and dark. Male and female. Visible and invisible. This isn't just philosophy. It's built into their mathematics. They use paired numbers and complementary angles in their calculations. What's really interesting is how they teach this knowledge. Young initiates start by learning simple patterns and gradually work up to more complex concepts. It's like a curriculum that takes years to master. They use songs, dances, and stories to help students remember the patterns. The rhythm of their music actually encodes mathematical ratios. Their masks and costumes aren't just for show either. The patterns on them represent astronomical phenomena. The Kanaga mask, worn during certain ceremonies, shows the rotation of Earth. Other masks represent different constellations or planetary movements. When dancers wear these masks and move in specific patterns, they're literally acting out cosmic events. The Dogon even understood something called dimensional thinking. They have symbols that represent not just 3D space, but time as a fourth dimension. They talk about how objects move through space-time, bending and warping. This sounds an awful lot like Einstein's theory of relativity, doesn't it? Their architecture reflects this cosmic knowledge too. Dogon villages are laid out to mirror the human body, which they say mirrors the cosmos. The placement of buildings corresponds to different organs, which correspond to different celestial bodies. It's like they built a giant astronomical map you can live in. The granaries where they store grain are built in a specific shape that represents the cosmos. They're cylindrical with a conical top, divided into compartments that represent different parts of the universe. Even something as practical as grain storage becomes a teaching tool for cosmic knowledge. Here's something that'll really bake your noodle. The Dogon have a concept they call the word. They believe that sound and vibration created the universe. Modern physics talks about string theory, where everything is made of vibrating strings of energy. The Dogon have been saying something similar for centuries. They also understand that light has a finite speed. They say that light from Ptolo takes time to reach Earth. They describe light as something that travels, not something that just exists everywhere instantly. This wasn't proven scientifically until the 1600s. The symbols get even more complex when you look at their creation myths. They have diagrams showing how the universe expanded from a single grain called the Pa. This grain exploded and created all matter and energy. The diagram looks remarkably similar to modern diagrams of cosmic inflation after the Big Bang. Think about this. A culture without written language in the traditional sense created a symbolic system so sophisticated that it accurately represents astronomical phenomena we've only recently discovered with advanced technology. Either they're the luckiest guessers in history, or they had access to knowledge we're only beginning to understand. How do you encode advanced astronomical knowledge without writing? And why does their symbolic system match up so well with modern physics? Share your thoughts below. This is the kind of mystery that keeps me up at night. Let's talk about what happens when modern scientists actually sit down and study the Dogon seriously. Because here's the thing. This isn't just some internet conspiracy theory. Real astronomers, anthropologists, and physicists have spent years trying to figure this out. And what they've found will absolutely blow your mind. In the 1970s, an astronomer named Kenneth Brecker from MIT decided to investigate. He thought he'd quickly debunk the whole thing. Instead, He came away saying the Dogon's knowledge was remarkable and couldn't be easily explained. He checked their astronomical claims against modern data and found they were way too accurate to be coincidence. Then in the 1990s, a team of French astronomers used the most powerful telescopes available to study the Sirius system in detail. They were looking for that third star the Dogon talked about, Emiya. And guess what? They found gravitational perturbations that suggested something else might be there. We still haven't confirmed it, but the evidence is mounting that the Dogon might be right about Sirius C. But here's where it gets really interesting. Scientists have found that the Dogon's knowledge goes way deeper than just astronomy. They have an understanding of biology that's equally mind-blowing. They knew that blood circulates through the body. They understood that plants need sunlight to grow, what we call photosynthesis. They even had theories about genetics and heredity that sound surprisingly modern. The Dogon talk about something called Nyama, a life force that exists in all things. They say it can be transferred, transformed, but never destroyed. Sound familiar? That's basically the law of conservation of energy. They understood that energy and matter are interconnected and can change forms. Modern physicists have noticed something else weird. The Dogon's description of Patolo matches perfectly with what we now know about quantum physics. They say Patolo vibrates and creates ripples in space. They describe it as spinning and creating spirals of energy. This is exactly how we now understand gravity waves and space-time distortion around massive objects. In 1998, a group of astronomers discovered that Sirius A is actually a binary star itself. It has a tiny companion. This means the Sirius system is even more complex than we thought. But here's the kicker. Some interpretations of Dogon mythology suggest they knew this too. They have symbols showing multiple objects around Sirius, not just 2 or 3. The Dogon's understanding of time is also fascinating to physicists. They don't see time as a straight line like we do. They see it as a spiral, where events repeat but at different levels. This is remarkably similar to certain interpretations of quantum mechanics where time isn't linear but cyclical at quantum scales. Scientists have also studied the Dogon's agricultural practices and found they're incredibly sophisticated. They use a complex rotation system that maintains soil fertility without modern fertilizers. They plant certain crops together that we now know have symbiotic relationships. They time their planting by the stars with incredible precision. Their medical knowledge is equally impressive. Dogon healers use plants that modern science has confirmed have medicinal properties. They perform surgical procedures like cataract removal that require precise knowledge of anatomy. They understand infection and use natural antibiotics that actually work. But here's the really weird part. The Dogon seem to know things we're just discovering. They talk about parallel worlds and multiple dimensions. They describe the universe as having a hidden structure that connects everything. This sounds exactly like what modern physicists call the holographic universe theory. In 2012, researchers studying Dogon mythology noticed their creation story describes the universe starting from a single point of infinite density and temperature. They even use the word "pe," which means small or seed, to describe this initial state. This is literally how we describe the singularity before the Big Bang. The Dogon also have this concept of doubling, where everything has a twin or mirror version. Quantum physicists now talk about quantum entanglement, where particles can be connected across vast distances. The Dogon have been describing something similar for centuries. Their understanding of DNA is particularly strange. They have symbols that look like double helixes. They talk about how information is passed from generation to generation through tiny seeds inside people. They even understand that children get traits from both parents, not just one. Modern linguists studying the Dogon language have found it's mathematically structured in ways that encode astronomical information. Certain words change meaning based on tonal patterns that match orbital periods. It's like they built astronomy into their language itself. Computer scientists have analyzed Dogon symbols and found they use a form of binary code. Certain patterns are either on or off, present or absent, creating a digital-like system for encoding information. This is remarkably similar to how we store data in computers. The Dogon's understanding of geology is also spot on. They correctly identify different types of rocks and minerals. They know which areas are likely to have water underground. They understand erosion and sedimentation. They even have accurate theories about how mountains form. What really puzzles scientists is the Dogon's knowledge of things that are invisible. They know about bacteria and germs, calling them tiny creatures that cause illness. They understand that air contains invisible particles. They even talk about waves of energy that pass through everything, which sounds a lot like electromagnetic radiation. In 2018, a team studying Dogon metallurgy found they use techniques that shouldn't work according to conventional science, but do. They can create steel alloys at temperatures that should be too low. They use specific sound frequencies during forging that somehow affect the metal's properties. Modern materials scientists are still trying to figure out how this works. The Dogon also seem to understand something about consciousness that we're just beginning to explore. They say consciousness isn't produced by the brain but channeled through it. They describe awareness as a field that extends beyond the body. This matches certain theories in quantum consciousness that suggest awareness might be a fundamental property of the universe. Their concept of death is scientifically interesting too. They say nothing really dies, it just transforms. They describe death as a change of state, like water becoming steam. Modern physics agrees. Energy cannot be created or destroyed, only transformed. Even their music contains scientific knowledge. The rhythms they use in certain ceremonies match the frequencies of planetary orbits when sped up. It's like they turned astronomy into sound. Some researchers think these frequencies might have psychological or even physical effects we don't fully understand. The big question remains: how do we explain all this? Cultural contamination doesn't work because much of this knowledge predates European contact. Lucky guesses don't explain the precision and interconnectedness of their knowledge. And dismissing it as coincidence ignores the sheer volume of accurate information. Some scientists now think we need to seriously consider that the Dogon preserve ancient knowledge from a previously advanced civilization. Others think they might have developed ways of perceiving reality that we've lost. And yes, some are even willing to consider the possibility that the Nommo story might contain more truth than we're comfortable admitting. What's your take? Are we looking at preserved ancient wisdom, alien contact, or something else entirely? This might be the most important mystery of our time. Let me know your thoughts. So here we are. We've just scratched the surface of one of the most mind-bending mysteries on our planet. A tribe in West Africa knew about invisible stars, understood quantum physics, and mapped the cosmos with impossible accuracy. All before we invented the telescope. Whether you believe the Dogon were visited by beings from Sirius, inherited knowledge from a lost civilization, or discovered these truths through methods we don't understand, one thing is undeniable. They knew things they shouldn't have been able to know. And that should make all of us question what else we might be missing. Maybe the biggest lesson from the Dogon isn't about astronomy or physics. Maybe it's about humility. We think we're so advanced with our smartphones and space stations, but perhaps we've forgotten more than we've learned. Perhaps there are ways of understanding the universe that don't require telescopes and computers. Perhaps the answers to our biggest questions have been sitting in plain sight, preserved by cultures we've dismissed as primitive. The Dogon remind us that knowledge can come from unexpected places. That wisdom doesn't always wear a lab coat. That sometimes the most profound truths are hidden in stories, symbols, and ceremonies we don't take seriously. So the next time you look up at the stars, remember the Dogon. Remember that somewhere in Mali, there are people who've been watching those same stars for thousands of years, holding knowledge that we're only beginning to understand. And maybe, just maybe, they're waiting for us to finally catch up. If this video opened your mind to new possibilities, hit that subscribe button. We're just getting started exploring the mysteries mainstream science doesn't want to talk about. Share this with someone who thinks they know everything about human history. And check out our video on the Sumerian tablets that describe space travel. Because the Dogon aren't the only ancient culture with impossible knowledge. What ancient mystery should we explore next? Drop your suggestions below. Until next time, keep questioning everything. Because the truth? It's stranger than we've been told.